Some knowledge was never lost. It was simply waiting to be read. This is another scroll from the Silent Guardian. Before the modern world learned how to control attention, it first learned how to shape perception. Perception is quieter than power. It does not command. It does not threaten. It does not announce its presence. It simply defines what appears real. Two people can stand in the same place, look at the same event, and yet inhabit entirely different realities. Not because the world changed, but because perception filtered it differently. Perception is the invisible lens through which the mind interprets existence. Most people assume they see the world as it is. But the mind does not observe reality directly. It reconstructs it. Every sound, every image, every story passes through layers of interpretation before it becomes what we call truth. Memory influences it. Emotion bends it. Narrative organizes it. And culture quietly frames its boundaries. Long ago, perception formed slowly. It was shaped by family, by direct experience, by the rhythm of communities, and the passing of time. But in the modern landscape, perception is no longer shaped slowly. It is shaped continuously. The human mind now lives inside a permanent stream of interpretations. Headlines explain events before reflection occurs. Commentary surrounds every image. Opinions arrive before observation has time to settle. The mind rarely encounters raw reality anymore. Instead, it encounters explanations. Explanations arrive instantly, and once an explanation enters the mind, perception reorganizes itself around it. A single phrase can redefine an entire event. A single narrative can alter how millions interpret the same moment. This is the silent architecture of perception. It does not tell people what to think. It simply arranges what they see first. Because what appears first in the mind often becomes what feels most true. The brain prefers coherence. It prefers patterns that feel complete. When a story provides that pattern, perception settles into it comfortably, even if the pattern is incomplete. Even if the pattern hides more than it reveals. Human perception was never designed for the scale of modern information. Every day, the mind encounters more images, messages, and interpretations than previous generations experienced in months. Each one slightly adjusting the lens. Each one leaving small impressions inside the architecture of thought. Individually, they seem insignificant. But together, they create an atmosphere. An atmosphere of assumptions, an atmosphere of expectations, an atmosphere of silent conclusions that shape how reality is interpreted before it is even examined. Over time, perception begins to operate automatically. The mind stops asking what something is. Instead, it asks which familiar category it belongs to. Friend or enemy, truth or deception, signal or noise, agreement or threat. These categories allow the brain to process complexity quickly, but they also simplify reality into narrow frames. Frames that are easier to manage, easier to predict, easier to control. Because once perception accepts a frame, everything inside that frame begins to appear obvious, and anything outside it becomes difficult to see. The most powerful structures in human history rarely relied on visible force. They relied on invisible framing. If perception can be guided, behavior follows naturally. No commands are necessary. No restrictions are required. People will defend the reality they believe they see, even when that reality was carefully assembled, piece by piece, around them. This is the elegance of perception. It feels like personal insight. It feels like independent understanding. It feels like clarity. But clarity can be manufactured, not through lies alone, but through selective visibility, through repetition, through emotional resonance, through stories that feel familiar enough to be trusted. The mind rarely questions what it has seen many times. Repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity creates comfort. Over time, comfort becomes belief, and belief quietly shapes perception even further. The world begins to appear exactly as the mind expects it to appear. Not because reality changed, but because the lens stopped adjusting. Yet, beneath this architecture lies a deeper ability within the human mind. the ability to observe perception itself, to notice how interpretations form, to notice how emotions color images, to notice how narratives guide understanding. This observation is rare, because observation requires distance, and the modern world rarely allows distance from its signals. Everything invites immediate reaction, immediate judgment, immediate interpretation. The moment something appears, the mind is encouraged to decide what it means. But perception deepens when judgment pauses, when the mind watches before it labels, when it observes before it categorizes. In those rare moments, something subtle happens. The lens becomes visible. And once the lens becomes visible, the mind realizes something quietly unsettling. The world it believed it was seeing clearly was always being filtered. Filtered by memory. Filtered by emotion. Filtered by stories inherited from others. Filtered by invisible architectures built long before the individual ever began to look. This realization does not destroy perception, it refines it, because awareness of the lens does not remove it, but it loosens its grip. The observer begins to notice when perception is being guided, when emotions are being stimulated, when narratives are shaping interpretation before evidence arrives. And in that moment, a different kind of attention awakens. A slower attention, a quieter attention, an attention that does not rush to conclusions. It waits, it observes, it studies the movement of thought itself. Few systems benefit from minds that observe their own perception, because a mind that observes cannot be easily steered. It cannot be rushed into immediate certainty. It cannot be guided by simple frames. It begins to see complexity where others see simple answers. It begins to see ambiguity where others see clear enemies. And ambiguity is uncomfortable for systems that depend on clear reactions. So the architecture continues its work. Faster information, stronger narratives, more signals competing for attention. All designed to keep perception moving too quickly to examine itself. Yet beneath the speed of the modern world, the deeper ability of the human mind remains unchanged. The ability to pause, the ability to observe, the ability to observe, the ability to notice how reality is assembled inside the mind before it becomes belief. This ability has always existed. It was never removed. It was only buried beneath noise, speed, and endless interpretation. But when perception becomes visible to itself, something quiet returns to the architecture of awareness. Not certainty, not control, but clarity. And clarity does not need to be loud. It does not argue with the world. It simply sees more than what is presented. Because once the mind understands how perception is shaped, the illusion of obvious reality begins to dissolve. And behind that illusion, a deeper question always waits. If perception can be guided, then what parts of reality have remained unseen? If this scroll reached you, another one is already waiting.